Hello, I'm Lauren Puckett, and this is Reviewing the Female Form in Scottish Stained Glass, Feminist Revisions and New Futurities. The aim of this practice-based PhD project begins with a re-examination of the female form in Scottish 20th to 21st century stained glass via contemporary feminist lens. Such a revolutionist examination of the portrayals of women in stained glass will open the possibility for a contemporary practice and presentation of women to both appropriate and subvert the historically predominant depictions of women within a traditionally patriarchal Christian narrative toward a dialogue with current women's movements, attempting to call into question and deconstruct the duality of gender roles and their representations in stained glass. My main research questions are: how can Western Christian patriarchal depictions of the female form in stained glass techniques be used as both a target of criticism and as a weapon against the patriarchal depictions of gendered power, representing the female form in contemporary stained glass as a mode of feminist critique and power? And secondly, without shying away from the complicated socio-political histories relevant to the world, can figurative depictions of contemporary women in the medium of stained glass reposition women within a field of power, awakening complex issues that many would prefer to, remain silent? I flashed through these images just so you could think about some of the examples that exist in 20th, 21st century. They're all cited if you would like to review them further. So what I'm trying to find out and answer is, can new presentation move beyond the status quo of women's representation within the medium of stained glass and look at what is presented in terms of the status quo? How can we build upon the iconological and semiological markers of the past in relation to the present? Or, as the architect Charles Jenks questioned, is it absurd and hubristic to define anything so general as an iconography of the present? How can contemporary perspectives of transcultural and transnational identities, or feminist identities, inform and build upon the iconological and semiological markers of previous generations toward a more inclusive representation of the female form in stained glass? In inserting a new female form into the predominantly Christian canon of figurative stained glass, I will bring the canon up to date, and at the same time question the centuries-long exclusion of such figures. This manner of portraiture in stained glass is a way of affirming the female presence in society that has long been discounted and undervalued. But like the work of Kehinde Wiley, it is an attempt to rehabilitate Black imagery or images as a means to rehabilitate stained glass portraiture of women in Scotland. It is a way of writing ourselves into the history. So who will be interested in my research? Who cares? The marginalized, underrepresented culture groups, I hope, feminists and feminist theories, especially with the women's movements and the current more polarized Western political climates, especially, actually everywhere, but people, all genders, non-gendered, of different ethnicities, different socioeconomic groups, different body types, people that are religious and non-religious, stained glass enthusiasts, which is probably my main audience, and researchers interested in art history, material culture, iconography, and semiotics. So for my research themes and methods and approaches, I want to qualify the historic art theorist positions as well as contemporary examples, and present who I agree with, who I disagree with, and how they drive my work. Post-structuralism, the plurality of theoretical positions, as Judith Baxter said, the specific focus of its interest is the language as a site for the construction and contestation of social meaning. So in that post-structuralist view, fictionalizing is a means of critique and pursuit of perspective truths that are concerned with creating a world through language, and hence the research is itself constitutive of world making. So with this, I'll create a visual language in stained glass made of icons and symbols, my mythopoesis, the woman, the myth, the legend, the making of a visual narrative of my choosing, qualified by the historical interpretations of symbols, language, icons, and signs, a critique of meta-narratives, of structuralism. There's no history with a capital H unless you're saying his story, but rather histories, meaning multiplicities. And 2, that all histories are narrative fictions. They're stories told by humans about the past as they see it. There's no single truth with a capital T as the right or correct truth, but there are many. And also, post-structuralist approach to discourse analysis, this act of self-reflexivity, the practice of calling attention to the, why can't I get this word out, constitutive powers of any form of analysis, that the connection can be made explicitly between what's analyzed and how it's being analyzed. So further, the role of deconstructive criticism derived from the work of post-structuralist Derrida can inform an analysis of language which does not attempt to identify one true meaning with a text, but recognizes the plurality, multivocality on all non-fixing of all meaning. And that's Judith Baxter, that last sentence. So I think about this as writing ourselves in, like Hamilton and the plays, which contextualizes so it can be received as, not the oppressor, or Octavia Butler, who wrote herself into sci-fi because she wanted to see Black women in sci-fi. You know what? For time, I won't go through every single one of these, but I will come back if you want in the question and answer. So examining postmodernism, the feminist post-structuralist discourse analysis, and bundling that to, how contemporary feminist perspectives distort traditional presentations of women in stained glass. I'm challenging those presentations through semiotic readings and postmodern post-structural bricolage. This creation from stained glass material, which also carries a huge historical narrative, the light of God, the transparency, with iconography, subject, the women, position, pose, point of view, which can be constructed through place. I can be really creative with this methodological framework, thinking about bricolage as an activator, using bricolage with feminist critique or presentation in stained glass, framing or grounding the practice and the methodological approach within a postmodern post-structural criticality. And as an example, these neoclassical pastiche artists, so Kehinde Wiley on the left, I don't want to qualify my work as just art by just using the styles. I really would like to position myself more in a postmodern, post-structural bricolage, passing through the pastiche. And so, artists like Laurie Pittman and Carol Walker, Laurie Pittman and craftivism, and the use of lace for new presentations of other and otherness in traditional forms, and Carol Walker reappropriating colonial imagery to challenge and critique what was really happening. All great examples. And again, with my approach, I touched on semiotic study, iconological examination, ethnographic study, interviews, case studies, social probes, observation. For fun, for this presentation, I tossed up this image to see the audience response, and I just asked, what do you see and how do you read this? And you can read the responses, but people thought that that it said nope. And I had a couple triggered responses. We know triggered over here. We know Western religion centralizes men and often bans women in leadership roles. So this seems like up yours. Fuck the patriarchy. And then other people read it as hope, with the image of a woman as symbolic. But then I see her holding the anchor, and I feel it could go two ways. One, women are being sunk by holding on to the idea of hope, maybe as opposed to real action. Or two, women are society's anchor to hope for any real progress. Another person said they were a feminist and an angry one, and they saw it as nope. I really think the nope comes from some of this political propaganda that we've been seeing a lot of. And then I skipped over, but... and then in my ethnographic studies, I will be... the university just published a really great biography of Scottish women. I've been reviewing some of the census, which has been surprising in terms of the breakdown of race. There are lots of great groups like Women's History Scotland, and I've been in touch with the Scottish Pakistani Women's Welfare Association, which I was really surprised in the census to see that there were 3% of the population was Asian, and 1% of that was Pakistani within that Asian demographic. And then finally, the fun stuff is the making and the documenting and blogging. But here you see what I've started is it's to scale of the piece we just reviewed. It's when standing, it's just over 10.5 feet, but I've built it to the panels and the stand come apart. Everything comes apart. It's really transportable, so I'll be able to move it around. And I've built this weighted box so it can freestand outside, and also you can get really close to it. As you'll see, Craig is my model. At the top of that arc there is the height in comparison to man. He stood in as my average man. But you can see where the frame fits into the bottom, and it's built where I can weight it down so it can actually sit safely outside, but also that people can get really close to it and view it as it would be presented from above. So it has that height, and this will be the smallest example that I intend to try, but I am hoping to begin placing these around at the beginning of the year. And so finally, what considerations do I take in account to my chosen process? Space and place are really important to me. The cultural spheres that surround it, the special attention to the site, address the audience, the situational aesthetics, from Hal Foster. They will present influence on the responses to my presentations of the new perceptual experiment. To tackle this, I hope to find a wide audience scope in various locations, college campuses, Women's Library of Glasgow, religious space, remote rural area, an unsheltered, heavily populated urban area of public domain, because I want to resituate a traditional medium, the space, into a contemporary setting, the time. Noting the space, canon will acculturate the object, as pieces shown in church will be likely interpreted as religious, and those featured in Women's Library will be seen as feminist. The presence of a work in an academic setting will be read quite differently than that of one in a rural environment. It won't be possible to create a socially neutral or cultural autonomy. And also here I'm thinking about Walter Benjamin's artistic function, as the meaning, value, and function of a work is determined by its exhibition, exchange, or presentation. I'll also be really sensitive to my subjects' privacy and recognize my own privilege and position when creating these representations of others. And that's all. Thank you for taking the time to listen. My website is laurenpuckett.com, and you can find me on Instagram at @GlassAirplane. See you soon.